Okay, let's dive right into a question that has pretty much defined the last several years of politics. Donald Trump. Is his leadership style just, a different, more controversial way of doing things? Or does it actually lean into something more authoritarian? It's a huge topic, so we're going to break down the arguments on both sides. So, this is the big one, right? This is the question that starts a million arguments. Now, it's a really heavy accusation to throw around. So, our job here isn't to give you a simple yes or no. Instead, what we're going to do is give you a framework, a toolkit, so you can look at all the evidence and decide for yourself. Because really, when you boil it all down, this whole debate is about these big ideas. On one side, you have the concept of power concentrated in one person at the top, and on the other, you have democracy, the idea that power is shared among the people. The tension between those two ideas, well, that's at the heart of everything we're talking about. So before we can even begin to talk about Donald Trump's specific actions, we have to get on the same page. Let's step back from all the heated political talk for a second and just look at what political scientists actually mean when they use a term like authoritarian traits. Now, this is super important. We're not talking about a single event or one controversial decision. We're talking about a pattern of behavior. It's a style of leading that over time tries to pull more power to the top, quiet anyone who disagrees, and get a grip on major institutions. It's the trend that matters, not just one moment. So what does that pattern actually look like in practice? Well, first, you'd see a real effort to concentrate power in the executive. Next, you'd see attempts to limit or even silence political opposition. Then, a push to control key institutions. Think the courts, the Justice Department, the media. And finally, all of this is usually wrapped in strong populist messaging that speaks directly to the people, often positioning the leader as their true voice. All right, so now that we have that framework in mind, let's turn to Donald Trump's leadership style. How do his actions, his words, and his policies stack up against those traits we just defined? This, right here, is where things get really interesting and, frankly, where people start to disagree. And here is the paradox in a nutshell. What one group of people sees as decisive, bold, and aggressive leadership, a real gets-things-done approach, another group sees as a fundamental challenge to the very norms of democracy. The exact same action can be interpreted in two completely opposite ways. So how does that connection with supporters get built? Well, it's often a bit of a playbook. First, a leader presents themselves as the only one who can protect the people from a corrupt establishment. Then, they rally their base using populist ideas and identity politics. And finally, they use direct channels, like social media, to completely bypass the traditional media and talk straight to their followers. But, of course, a leader doesn't just get to do whatever they want, especially not in the American system. There's a really powerful counterargument here, and it's all about the system's own built-in protections, the guardrails that are designed specifically to stop any one person from getting too powerful. This is like rule number 1 in the American Democracy Handbook. The entire system was built with this idea in mind, to prevent the very concentration of power that we see in authoritarian governments. No single person or branch of government is supposed to have the final say on everything. And here are the big ones. You've got the courts, which can rule a president's actions unconstitutional. You have Congress, which controls the money and has the power to impeach. Then you have the states, which have their own authority. And, of course, a free press, the fourth estate, whose job it is to hold power accountable. All of these are supposed to work like brakes on presidential power. So you've got this argument about authoritarian traits on one side, and on the other, you've got the argument about the system's checks and balances. So where does that leave the American public? Well, as you can probably guess, it leaves the nation pretty deeply divided. The polls consistently tell this story. You can see just how stark the divide is. You have a massive chunk of the population that sees him as a true champion of the people fighting for them. And then you have another nearly equal-sized group that believes his actions are actively crossing democratic boundaries. The country is split, almost right down the middle, on how to see his presidency. And this is really what it all boils down to. There just isn't a simple yes or no here that's going to satisfy everybody. The answer you come to really depends on how you view his actions. Do you see them as a necessary way to shake up a broken system, or as a dangerous erosion of the principles of democracy? So, in the end, we have to leave the final question with you. We've laid out the framework for what authoritarian behavior looks like. We've talked about the American system's powerful guardrails, and we've looked at just how divided public opinion is. Is this an authoritarian leadership style, or is it just something that's been profoundly misunderstood?
We've given you the tools for the analysis. The final verdict is yours.